We're gonna start now. So, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining us tonight again. And I'm Jerry, president of Aias Pratt chapter and the coordinator of Aias Pratt lecture series this year. And this is our fourth lecture, and I'm very, very honored and glad that Youngdae is giving us like this lecture today. And he has been extremely supportive of us in reaching the goals of our chapter, which is to build a sustainable platform for architecture students inside and outside of Pratt. Yeah, and
Hi
Calvin.
everyone, I'm Calvin. I'm the treasurer of Aias Pratt, and I'm gonna introduce the lecture. So Youngdae graduated from Columbia Master of Architecture program in 2018 and has gotten an amazing start of his career at Sou Fujimoto Architects in Tokyo. As we briefly mentioned on our post, he is the prominent project designer of Shenzhen Reform and opening up exhibition hall in Shenzhen, China, which is their first prize-winning proposal in an international competition. The lecture will be divided into 3 parts. The first and second parts will be mostly about his ways of seeing and his interpretation of Tokyo as well as Japanese architecture. The third part will focus on his professional practice in Sou Fujimoto Architects. After the presentation, we'll only take 3 questions max. So if you have questions but couldn't ask today, please send us a DM or Slack message. We will interview him based on those questions and we'll upload before April 15th. Now I pass it on to Youngdae's presentation.
Okay. Hi everyone, good evening. Here in Tokyo, it's now around 7 a.m. morning. So I feel like I'm practicing a rehearsal before the final presentation when I was in school. But anyway, thank you so much for inviting me to join this wonderful lecture series. I'm Youngdae Song, an architectural designer at Sou Fujimoto Architect. Today, I'd like to share some personal observations to Japanese architecture based on my living experiences in Tokyo and working experiences at Sou Fujimoto Architect. So it's not going to be a serious lecture like a thesis presentation. So hopefully all of you just enjoy the lecture like you are traveling in Japan through my storytelling. Basically, my life has been a progress between exploration and observation. From South Korea to the US and now in Japan, all the experiences in each different country gave me a sense that how should I rethink of the current living environment, which is fully surrounded by Japanese architecture. And it became a foundation of today's presentation. I was always curious how all these Japanese architects from Kenzo Tange to Junya Ishigami to even younger generations have influenced on architectural history. What kind of inspirations behind their ideas and architectures? Also, I was able to hear these keywords from their lectures many times: transparency, openness, architectural nature, inside and outside, blurring boundary in between, continuity and fluidity, simplicity and minimalism. What makes them to think such direction for their designs? Overseas countries also have a strong interest in Japanese architecture. This is a lecture held at Columbia GSAP. It was a group invitation from Toyo Ito to Junya Ishigami. This diagram by Toyo Ito shows how they are trying to define what is Japanese architecture and what is their relationship, similarity, and difference in between. And there was an exhibition held at Harvard GSD. It was only for a Japanese architect, Kazuo Shinohara, who is still a legendary architect in our mind. About same Shinohara, this is a lecture at GSD and discussion with Kazuo Sejima. GSD also did a research project named Japan Story. It has a lot of amazing resources including interviews with Japanese architects such as Toyo Ito, and also research and design projects by students. Through all these aspects, my curiosity has ended up with today's chapters. In the first chapter, I'd like to share not renowned architectures, which we already know, but it's more about inspirations behind daily sceneries in the living environment. In the second chapter, I will present various cultural programs and services, which provide a great chance for architects to explore their ideas and how public can be connected to architecture. Lastly, learning from Sou Fujimoto Architect. It's not only some motivations I joined this office, but also what I'm learning from recent ongoing projects and from Sou Fujimoto's attitude and perspectives. Okay, let's explore Tokyo from urban scale to human scale. We can start with a Tokyo's urban definition. Basically, we know Tokyo as the capital city of Japan. This shows a central area with 23 special wards where we can find main Tokyo's images. But actually, Tokyo is a prefecture at a metropolis scale, including more 26 cities, 5 towns, and 8 villages. Even it's expanded to surrounding prefectures as Greater Tokyo area. And finally, the whole area is defined as National Capital Region in Japan. So it means that Tokyo is not based on one center with clear boundary, but it's more made up of diverse centers with various boundaries. In other words, it has more potential to allow diverse interactions between each single community. Both images from Edo to Tokyo, we can tell there's a vagueness of Tokyo's edge. It means that Tokyo is not just one city, but it's more mixed environment between city, town, village, and nature. I guess that's why many Japanese architects usually consider relationships between architecture and city, architecture and nature, and architecture as a part of the environment. Then what kind of urban system connects each different region in Tokyo? Firstly, there are lots of floating highways and railways crossing the middle of Tokyo. It creates another layer as a three-dimensional landscape between ground and the sky. Also, diverse factors intersect on multiple levels. It means that the city itself can be experienced differently based on which movement we choose. So this floating highway provides another experience to perceive the city's other faces, which is hardly achieved from the ground level. It looks like somehow a racing game scene or even futuristic experience crossing the city in the air. Anywhere we stand up, there are always movements above or underneath. So it creates not one-to-one relationship between architecture and city, but more intertwined network in between. Sometimes transportation becomes an architecture through this penetration and vice versa. Here is an example which is located in the middle of Tokyo. This ring-shaped building looks like an architecture, but also it connects various expressway junctions as well. If we get closer, we can see there's a rooftop landscape which links 2 towers in each side, and even there are parking lot and courtyard underneath. Then how can we define this building? Is it architecture, transportation, landscape, or something else? Therefore, compared to other cities, Tokyo is an interwoven metropolis, which multidimensional movement flows through the whole urban environment. It looks like a digital world, which everything is interrelated, and it's hard to tell what is city, what is architecture, and what is connection in between. This characteristic reminds me of Sou Fujimoto's early project, which was the winning proposal. It's an architecture, but also something beyond architecture. Like Tokyo, this project allows diverse flows from everywhere, and flow itself becomes an architecture. There are gathering and spreading moments like any urban environment. Through Tokyo and this project, it helps me to reconsider a definition of city and architecture. Next topic is urban roof. What is this urban roof? There are still many places to keep these overhead power lines above the street because of earthquake and maintenance issue. Someone might say that it looks messy and ugly, so it should be removed. But I feel like it's somehow inspiring to create a soft layer to connect each independent building. Sometimes there are intersections on multiple levels and covering the whole urban area through this curvy and light layer. So compared to figure and ground relationship, which everything is clearly defined, these power lines create a certain continuous relationship between architecture and city. Then how Tokyo can be experienced by human scale? This green line shows 7 kilometers pedestrian pathway, which there's no car or public transportation within this sequence at all. We can compare the lengths in Manhattan. It's almost from Central Park to more than Midtown area. I find it very interesting since it has a cozy scale within this huge urban metropolis. It gives some sense that we are still walking on the inside of one building. Normally, cities' experiences are split because of huge roads, cars, and any vehicles blocking a sequence. But here, we can just use our own body and sense to cross all the way through this urban space. It's quite similar as what we experience in architecture. Through a certain sequence, we encounter diverse people and programs. This pathway also connects each single community to allow diverse interactions in between. Also, there are lots of other pathways to interlink each region like branches in Tokyo. Another type is a shopping arcade, generally located in front of the main stations. Sometimes it's crossing as a curvy landscape and flowing all the way as a semi-outdoor space, which provides a buffer zone between architecture and city. Based on this urban environment, some architects got inspirations and tried, what if outdoor street scale is continuous to a house inside as one sequence? So simply covering a box with this pathway creates an interesting form. And it allows some moments that a room can be expanded out to this pathway, or pathway itself has its own function to stay for a while, like outdoor street. Another example also shows the same strategy to create a continuous sequence from the street to the building inside. As a semi-outdoor space, it blurs the boundary between architecture and city. As we can see, this inside out and outside in provides flexible interactions between each other. Therefore, in Tokyo, there's no such clear separation between urban street and architecture. There's always a link between each other as a continuous experience. Tokyo and in-betweenness. These are very common daily sceneries we can experience every day on Tokyo streets. There are lots of things covering the street with lightings, signages, furnitures, or tripods, and something else. It looks a little bit messy, but compared to this one-to-one relationship between architecture and city, inside and outside, ground and the sky, all the things can be used as an in-between scale, as thus creates gradient relationships between architecture and people, ground and the sky. This spatial relationship is also existing in Japanese traditional architecture, which calls Engawa space. There are several layers between inside and outside, so we can see architecture is not a solid object, but it's just defined through diverse spatial depths and buffer layers. This aspect on Tokyo streets or in historical architecture might influence on some contemporary projects such as N House by Sou Fujimoto. Here, the architecture itself is made up of various spatial relationships between architecture, city, people, and nature. This house by Junigarashi shows how this strategy creates spatial isolation and continuity within a sequence at the same time. Next one is Tokyo and scale. While living in Tokyo, I could find an interesting typology, which is located in one of the most populous regions, Shinjuku area. There's a low rise and high density property. From the top view, we can clearly see a scaled comparison between surrounding context, such as towers, huge commercial buildings, and this collective small fragment in the middle. We don't really see anything special from the street level, but when we get closer, then suddenly this hidden street comes out, and it's quite surprising how this scale exists within this huge urban area. All the different small izakayas are along this cozy street and create diverse relationships each other. It reminds me of Moriyama House in terms of fragment and cozy in-between scale. Within this urban area, outdoor street scale is continued to this inner property and creates this nice in-between space for diverse interactions and nature's flow. We can also find this scheme was used for a roof strategy. Here, the collective housing by Kazuo Sejima. Through this roof fragment, the whole building scale blends into the surrounding context while keeping this cozy in-between scale inside at the same time. The last topic for Tokyo is something unusual. Whenever I'm strolling around Tokyo street, sometimes I find this kind of weird moment. A tiny shrine is built inside of a normal building or attached to this house. It makes me to reconsider what if totally different programs we already know can be combined in a different way and create something new. Also, there's a crazy proportion house in the middle of residential area. Seems from this past picture, the pathway became a house and this corridor itself is architecture. I'm not really sure how residents experience every day with this space, but somehow it gives me a sense that what if totally different proportion can be used as an architectural element, such as super tall or super long, something like that. And some architects even got some inspirations from escape stairways, and they tried to use it as a medium to connect between architecture and city. Through all the characteristics of Tokyo I mentioned above, I can find city, town, village, transportation, infrastructure, architecture, nature, and people. All of these are interlinked, and it might be a huge influence on Japanese architecture. Okay, we are now moving to the second chapter. I'd like to share what kind of cultural programs and services, which are also quite important to know the reason why Japanese architecture is such strong. From public event, there was an exhibition named House Vision. It was held twice with different topics. The aim of the exhibition was to explore a future house and lifestyle with the latest technology, or how architects can find the balance between individual and shared spaces. Through this event, architects got a great opportunity to test their ideas as one-to-one scale architecture, and also public can enjoy the space. And it might be a motivation for people to think of what kind of future house or lifestyle is coming. And not only for the exhibition, this project by Go Hasegawa was moved to another area in Japan after the event. And it's still used as an Airbnb, so it gives a chance that people to experience one architecture idea continuously. Next event is Pavilion Tokyo, which was held in last year during the Olympic season. This project set up several spots in Tokyo and invited diverse artists and architects. So here again, this is a chance for architects to explore their ideas based on each site context. And they also find how people react to their design intention. Public can enjoy their pavilions without any boundary. So it means that this kind of public event connects architects and people. This is Tokyo Toilet Project. It was started to change a public toilet image, which is a kind of dirty and unsafe. So like Pavilion Project, there are different areas to install each project toilet. Designed by Toyoito, Kengo Kuma, Tadao Ando, and even there's a graphic designer, Kashiwa Sato. This is a design by Shigeru Ban. He proposed a transparent toilet, which sounds strange, but transparency and opaqueness can be controlled by electricity button. So it shows a cleanliness and safety directly from outside. Another example is by Kengo Kuma, which looks like a part of forest within this park. When I was here, these people were quite surprised and enjoyed this architecture. It looks like how toilet can look like this. Through this service, public can realize their society and the living environment are getting better through architecture as a medium. And next, food plus architecture. Recently, I found an interesting project by a studio named Bento Architecture. What they propose is that what if food experience can be combined with architecture and space. So this becomes a great promotion for people to know what kind of architectural masterpieces exist in Japan, such as Sana's 21st century museum, Tadao Ando's Sumiyoshi House, and Sou Fujimoto's Tokyo apartment. Also, when they select each food or eat food, they can start to think of a spatial relationship within this bento. Here is a very famous culture in Japan, miniature vending machine. It's not only for kids, but also any people like to enjoy, as we can see from this picture. Recently, I crossed this area and suddenly found this by chance. Kengo Kuma office started to service these miniatures with their iconic projects. I also got 3 different miniatures, which was quite lucky not to pick the same project. This could be a good motivation for children or any people to start to get interest in architecture, and we never know if someone makes a decision to study architecture and becomes a future architect. Here is a very important exhibition and competition for young generation architects under 35 years old. Jury members are usually Sou Fujimoto, Toyo Ito, and Akisa Hirata, and others. Young architects who got into the shortlist can have an exhibition which opens to public. Then people can also think who will be the next generation of architects and how their living environment could be changed through their architectures. At the end, there are 2 prizes, gold medal and Toyo prize. Winners can get an opportunity to step up to the next level, which is mainly Japanese Architects Society. So this exhibition is a hope for young architects and even students to do their best for architecture, and it will be a potential seed for future Japanese architecture. Okay, we don't really see any relationship between Tokyo Gas and architecture, but actually Tokyo Gas invited 4 architects for their experiment with a title House of Future. So there are Toyohito Terunobu Fujimori, Taira Nishizawa, who is a brother of Rie Nishizawa, and Sou Fujimoto. This is a great chance not only for their experiments, but also it provides a platform for a deep discussion between each architect. Toyohito found an architecture school for children for their future generation. So they are learning from physical models and presentations to express their ideas. Also, they do site visit and one-to-one furniture scale as well. We can see a hope in the future Japanese architecture. Last one is their publication system. Normally, bookstores just place books or text, but some bookstores in Japan, they do exhibition for architects and their projects with this kind of huge book or gift box. Also, there's each architect portrait and their iconic project with main awards they got. Through this action, people with no idea about architecture could encounter who are the Japanese architects and what's their projects, which might arouse their curiosity to architecture. So I feel here in Japan, not only architects or people in architecture field, but also the entire society is moving forward to the better environment. Finally, we reached the last chapter, Sou Fujimoto Architect. Our office is based on Tokyo and Paris, but it doesn't mean that each office is limited to a regional boundary. Both offices are working on diverse projects in any kind of countries. Before explaining more details about the office, I'd like to share what was my motivation to join the office and how it influenced on some personal projects. I was quite surprised when I saw Sou Fujimoto's early project, Primitive Future House. Compared to dominant system in modern era, which everything was defined through top-down system, his proposal shows how functions and intentions can be decided by users. So they use this space as a table, bench, chair, room, or landscape. It's similar in a music sheet structure. Here, the left side, Baha's Goldberg variation is flowing based on manuscript lines. So it follows a certain big system. But this right side, music and time, are flowing based on each relationship. It was quite inspiring how relationship-oriented system has a potential for the future. Also, this real-life project from the same idea, Serpentine Pavilion, gave me a sense that architecture doesn't need to be a building shape. It can be any kind of form and space to allow diversity within the whole living environment. And again, N-house, as we saw in the previous page, it broadened my horizon. How should I perceive our living environment through relationship-based perspectives? The last one is the exhibition, Architecture is Everywhere. As we can see, any kind of daily stuff can be transformed to architecture. It gives us a lesson. How should we observe the world? So all of these inspirations had impact on my individual project. This is my undergrad thesis. It was an analysis and design project, how architecture can have a liquid-like transparency. From basic research of grayscale experience in between, and what is the different result between the grid-oriented system and relationship-oriented system. I try to focus on what if architectural plates become a part of landscape to create diverse relationships on each different height, and then how to relate each landscape one by one as a strategy to figure out coexistence of separation and connection inside and outside and architecture and landscape. Next project was a team project at Columbia GSAP. Studio's topic was stacking. So we tried to figure out what kind of daily stuff can be just stacked and become architecture. And finally, we ended up with this shoes brush and tried to redefine what is this brush space. Back to general buildings, which every infrastructure is built inside of core system. We thought, what if all these infrastructures are spread out to the whole space and create various densities within the space? And then we set up a basic bifurcation system for the energy flows, and also studied various thicknesses that how it affect to the spatial density. So simply stacking, it becomes an architecture. With diverse spatial densities on each floor, there are forest-like space and column-free space. And each infrastructure, power lines supplies electricity for people to charge their phone or laptop, but and also water pipe, air pipe, bring the outdoor nature to inside space. And the minimum number of infrastructures create each housing unit. Through this project, I could learn how daily stuff can be architecture based on how we observe them. The last project is also the teamwork at Columbia GSAP. It was a class that how can we understand history as a contemporary way? So we have selected Korean traditional architectural element, dancheong, which has this kind of flower relief at the end and wavy patterns in the middle. Through a lot of studies to get dancheong's aspect, which has diverse patterns, we found out two modules as a system. And based on each combination, it creates various flower-like patterns and also wave patterns like traditional reliefs at the same time. So this project helped me, how can I redefine and re-understand our tradition and history to transform in a contemporary way. And then I was thinking, maybe there are some continuous ideas with Sou Fujimoto. So I wanted to join this office, and now I'm here. Back to the office, our office is not limited to any kind of programs, scales, sites, and types. We are doing a lot of competition and commission projects from this landmark scale to the residential building. Also, we do interior designs, pavilion projects, and installations like this virtual space or with lighting designs. So after I joined this office, I've been working on diverse competition projects and some commission projects as well. And we finally got the first prize, Shenzhen and Reform and Opening Up Exhibition Hall project. This project is a part of the planning Shenzhen 10 cultural facilities of new era. All the winning proposals were confirmed through each competition. And we can see there are Jean Nouvel, MAD, Zaha, Sana, and others as well. Our project is located in Shenzhen, China. The whole area is planned for the development, including each front-side building as a performance center and financial center. And there was a key context as a green corridor from Northside Mountain, Lake, Park to our site, the greenery area and the Shenzhen Bay at the end of the south. When we joined this competition for the first time, I was in the smallest team at the office, only me and team leader and communicate with Sou Fujimoto. So it was a great chance to propose diverse concept ideas, program relationships, even landscape designs and something else. And it helped me to understand all the surrounding context, tradition and history of Shenzhen and how our proposal should be positioned within these nature and urban context. So we tried to figure out what could be a balance between monumentality as a memorial hall and also a certain transparency to allow diverse flows from nature and city. Therefore, we made the decision to go for this maximized volume on site, but as a floating envelope to open up to the surroundings. After we passed the first stage, our team became a little bit bigger, and it was a nice teamwork with more people for deeper studies. And finally, we won the competition. During the process, we did a lot of studies for traditional patterns, how it can be redefined and transformed to find out new patterns for the facade. And through the open space on the ground level, it allows the green corridor between south and north nature, but also provides a continuous experience between architecture and city. This is a center atrium covered by a lighting filter box. This is one building for sure, but also somehow it looks like a city. There are multiple movements on different levels, spreading and gathering moments at the same time. Each independent box is shifted both in planar and sectional to create various gaps in between where people's activities are happening with art and nature. And three-dimensional connections interweave the whole area so people can experience the architecture with diverse angles. From this project, I'm still learning how to solve any requirements or regulations in each stage through a designer's point of view. Sometimes we found better design by figuring out solutions. And also, I'm learning a lot from Sou Fujimoto, who is always optimistic and open-minded person. He's quite open to any kind of possibilities from everywhere. I guess that's why our office doesn't have such strict hierarchy between each other, and then makes a healthy communication between each designer and also with Sou Fujimoto, which helps a lot to find something potential together. Second project is Uniqlo Park, which was built around 2 years ago. The site location is in front of Tokyo Bay area. Compared to a normal shopping mall, which has fully occupied floor areas with a box envelope, here it has an urban landscape to connect between city and architecture and ground and the rooftop of the building. On this sliding landscape, there are a lot of families to enjoy the space together with their kids, even people without any purpose for Uniqlo. Visit here and enjoy the space as an architecture itself. So it makes me to rethink what is the role of architecture in our environment? Should architecture have a specific program, or it can be just experienced as a part of urban space? And what if totally two different programs are combined and become something new? Also, I guess, thanks to this playful space, the commercial effect might also increase through a lot of visitors. The last project is Torch Tower, which is planned to be built in 2028. The building will be located nearby Tokyo Station. It will be the tallest skyscraper in Japan, but our office is not doing the whole tower. The below part is ongoing from a big corporation and our office for the top volume. As we can see, it looks like a torch or crown or floating mountain above the tower, and it creates a huge urban gap in between. The gap is for this urban plaza or hill in the sky, with amazing views toward Tokyo skyline and Mountain Fuji. Here again, normally public plazas are located on the ground level, or at least on the lower level in the city. But combining two typologies between skyscraper and urban hill, it becomes a place where we never experienced before. I could learn how to re-understand conventional meanings of each program, and totally different two functions can create something totally new. Throughout today's chapters, my personal observation and thought toward Japanese architecture is that they are always trying to redefine and re-understand history, tradition, culture, the whole living environment, and conventional relationships. And then it brings up something new, potential, inspirational, and something for the future. I would like to end up the lecture with the title, Beyond Sceneries. Scenery in English word means what we see in front, like a picture. But when it's written in Chinese characters, the pronunciation can be pungyang in Korean. This pung means a literal wind, and gyang means a literal scene. But pung implies more meanings like a flow or atmosphere beyond, which is invisible. It's similar in Japanese architecture that there are always certain relationships, history, context, and people beyond the architecture itself. Through this perspective, I'm also still trying to have every morning differently by strolling new streets I've never passed before to explore and observe something new beyond sceneries. Thank you.
Thank you. This is amazing, really amazing lecture that I've ever had. One of the best lecture. Thank you again, Youngdae, for this amazing your observation, like presentation. It was really great to hear about your personal like experiences and perspectives. So we'll now move on to Q&A session. Since we have little time, we'll just take like 3 questions. So please use the raise hand feature on Zoom. And when you're asking question, you can turn on your camera.